Welcome to the podcast where mental health is at the core of what we focus on. We strive to develop people like you to maximize who you are and what you've been called to do by sharing tools and resources for better brain health. And now here's your host, Juan Garcia.
So thanks for joining us, everybody, here at our podcast, Mind Yours, where we focus on mental health and peak performance. And today I have the distinct privilege and honor to have as our guest Justin Batt, who focuses on Daddy Saturday. Obviously, we are excited for a person that focuses on fatherhood and likes to uplift men and help them not only as fathers, but also as men. And so, Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Juan, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
So let's get right to it, Justin. I know you wrote a book. It's called Daddy Saturday, How to Be an Intentional Dad to Raise Good Kids Who Become Great Adults. Tell me a little bit about what brought you to writing this book and what was that journey like? And how do you hope that that can help not only fathers, but men as a whole?
Yeah, so I was a young married man, and my wife decided to leave teaching and go into being an entrepreneur and open her own business. And I supported her in that endeavor. And she opened a bridal boutique. And so being in retail, we had our first child at the same time she opened the store. We actually named the store after her, Hayden Olivia Bridal in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my wife was, being the entrepreneur, wearing all the hats, and I was in a corporate role. And so I was at home with our daughter all day on Saturdays while my wife worked at her store, her new business. And fast forward, we had 3 boys every 2 years. So we ended up with 4 kids. Wow. And I was a corporate America father who had ascended up in the ranks of corporate America and found myself, like a lot of dads in that scenario, trying to balance, work and home, and was stressed out, tired, overwhelmed, often feeling inadequate or insecure as a dad and as a man for that matter. And I had those days on Saturday with my kids all day long, 8 or 10 hours while my wife worked. And we just weren't having the most productive, the best days that I knew we could. It was a blessing. It was a gift to have my kids on those days and support my wife. And so I just said, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to reframe this whole thing. So we created a game plan for our time together. I started to look at my week and optimize my week so I wasn't burning myself out, had gas left in the tank for my kids on those Saturdays. And that mindset changed everything. Our relationship, our communication, our time together, the epic moments and memories we were creating, even my relationship with my wife changed.
Wow.
And so I found myself with 4 kids who were saying on Wednesday, hey, Dad, what are we doing on Saturday? And one of my kids affectionately said, Dad, what are we doing for Daddy Saturday? And he named it. And I'm like, that's it, son. We're claiming that.
Nice.
I love it. And so Daddy Saturday, became what it is. I was then asked to do a TEDx about 2.5 years ago. And the topic was on fatherlessness. And the conversation was around the fact that there's over 24 million kids in America who don't have a biological dad living in their home. Even more importantly, there are millions more kids who have a dad who's physically present but emotionally absent. And when I learned that and I thought about that and in fact, applied that to myself and said, gosh, there are plenty of times where I've been physically present, but I wasn't there emotionally for my kids. Stressed out at work or, my circumstances were dictating my responses or my reactions. And I had a formula that I'd figured out through Daddy Saturday that I thought could help dads. And so I felt called to go and write the book and create a manual and a toolkit, if you will, to help dads do the same thing. And from there, it's turned into a movement. And we've got an Alexa skill, a Google Assistant. We've got a course called Dad Boss, a 7-part series, digital course to help dads in faith, family, fitness, finance. And then we've got an international nonprofit as well, national and international, and have our offices in Daddy Saturday, Kenya, that recently just got established. So,
wow.
What started in my backyard with my 4 kids has now become something that is a movement that we're trying to take around the world to help dads and men be better men and more engaged dads.
Oh, that's phenomenal, Justin. And on behalf of so many out there, thank you for responding to the call and putting all of this on paper. And more importantly, putting content out there. I was looking at your website, and I know that you also have a podcast where you also bring in resources and you interview individuals as well. So we have a lot in common in terms of our passions. And I know I was a product of an absentee father who, I played high school football. I was being scouted by Division I colleges, and my dad had no clue that I even played football. So it was difficult, to say the least, not to have, someone in the stands, specifically my dad, who can cheer me on every Saturday as we went out there, as my number would be called, as the music would start, and I would catch a touchdown or make a great play on defense. It was hard. It was hard. Tell the listeners a little bit about, some of the things maybe you encountered growing up as a young person, as a child, as a young person, some of the potential challenges, obstacles, as much as you're comfortable with, and also how did you create some mental toughness? What were the things that mentally you were able to say, okay, I need to do this in order to achieve that? Because you and I also have something in common, which is our faith. We're both Christ followers. We believe that, our faith in Christ is the center of who we are. And so there are different types of people that listen to this podcast. I was actually speaking to a colleague here in South Carolina, where I am now, who is an actual atheist. And he was listening to the podcast and actually said it was great. And I don't shy away from my faith. And so it's interesting how anybody could be listening. And so what were some of the things that you were able to overcome and I guess created this mental toughness that I clearly see that you have?
Yeah, so I think, to address the first question, my dad was present. My parents are still married to this day. He was a very engaged father, but he came from a really rough background. And so I think, he had abuse and neglect in his background. And so my dad was one of those dads that was just like, I just want to make things better for my kids than I had it for myself, right? And so he was at almost all my games. He coached all my games all the way through, and he was very involved, spent a ton of time with me. But like any dad, right, there's positives and there's some downsides too. Yeah. And a lot of that's just from not knowing, or maybe from background or experience and what he went through. And my dad and I have had these conversations, so I'm happy to share them openly. And one of the challenges that I had was my dad was very performance driven. He lived through me a lot. So my athletic achievements were a response to, his validation, both in the community and with himself personally. And so when I would have a great game, he was my biggest fan. But if I didn't perform well, especially as I get into high school, I can remember times where I would come home and he wouldn't be there, or we would kind of get into it because I was seeking love and affection and affirmation. And, he would talk to me and say, I'd make all the tackles in the game, but I'd miss one tackle. And he would point out the one tackle instead of talking about the 100 tackles I did make. Right. And so I grew up in a very results driven environment. And that affected me dramatically into my younger years. I found myself in college trying to prove myself, caused me to get in some trouble in college, when you're trying to find yourself. In my young professional life, I was trying to prove myself. It caused me not to ask for help in a lot of situations and try to be very independent and individual because I was very results driven. And then it also affected me as a father. And I found myself in my early days of coaching my kids in very young youth sports, I was already starting to move into that critical, results-driven type of mentality. So for me, one of the obstacles I overcame just from out of experience was I had thankfully, by the grace of God, had the foresight to be able to understand that it's about relationships, not results. And so with my kids, one of the things that I've changed and learned from and grown in is that we will focus on their character, their work ethic, right? Their performance based on doing their best and not on the specific results. And so as long as they give their best and they try hard and they have good character, then that's what I'm rewarding. That's what I'm focused on. And we let the rest take care of itself. And the one rule that we kind of have is we're going to go get ice cream after the game, no matter what happens. Right. Yeah. And so that way we maintain our relationship. And we're not focused just on the results. And it's hard. I'm like a competitive, driven dad. And like all dads, we want the best for our kids. And we want to see them do well and succeed. And if they miss a play or don't get a hit or miss a pass or whatever, we want to get in there, and help them and correct them. But it's like, for me, relationship always takes precedence. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is I was like you, played football all the way through and was a decorated player going into my senior year, and I lacerated my kidney our first day of hitting practice and ended up missing half the season. Miraculously was able to come back and play. but it just changed so much for me in terms of my thinking. And I had to overcome a lot to even come back, not only physically, but mentally, and be able to play those last 5 games. And so that was the starting point of me of overcoming, physical adversity, mental adversity. Really grew in my faith a ton during that point. And that was the start of that journey of me learning how to overcome obstacles. And I've never stopped ever since, right? I've seen obstacles as opportunities. And now I do Spartan races, which is an obstacle course race that is insane. Most people think you're crazy in doing those things. But, they physically put obstacles in front of you across a half marathon, essentially, in mountains and backwoods and barbed wire and water and things. And so you physically have to overcome those, but it's more mental than it is physical. Mm-hmm. And so I've now put myself in challenges every single day where I have to overcome something. I have to put myself in uncomfortable situations, and it's become part of my lifestyle. And this is interesting. So I just got stung by a stingray back in May. It was our last surfing trip in Charleston before we moved to Nashville. Got stung by a stingray. It's the most excruciating pain I've felt in my life, worse than my kidney injury. It was brutal.
Wow.
And then a couple of weeks ago, I got stung by some yellow jackets when we were out here on the farm. And literally, I'm not saying this to be arrogant, like I just kind of brushed them off and was like, I got stung 4 times and was like, oh, whatever. Yeah. Because the pain of the stingray was so fresh that those yellow jackets were like literally nothing, right? Like mosquito bites, because the intense pain that I had experienced was still so raw that that small pain felt insignificant. And so I think that's a great lesson in life. It's a great lesson for our kids, in that the more you make yourself uncomfortable, the more you put yourself through obstacles that are challenging, where you have to face adversity, overcome failure, the easier that process gets because you're used to experiencing it. And so that's a mindset that I have, and it's something that I prescribe within Daddy Saturday. It's a core principle, and it's something I certainly teach to my own kids.
That is so awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think the reason why I started this podcast is because I feel that, having worked with the NBA and the NFL as a life coach, as a chaplain, 80% of what they have to face is right here. It's in the mind, and their mindset, their mentality, either going into that game or just throughout that week, preparing for the game, potential matchups. The media obviously plays a huge role, and now with social media and everybody putting their 2 cents into, strategy and even value, right? Some of the value that some of the athletes may have or not have because of what someone said. And so it affects performance. And what you just shared is so helpful. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners will be so inspired to understand that, adversity is going to happen. It's not a matter of how, but when, right? It's going to happen. It's a matter of how we respond to those adverse moments and challenges. And I'm interested to know, we do live in a culture and society where, second place is just good enough, right? You get participation trophies in many places. And obviously nothing against that. I understand some of the intent behind that. But obviously there is something that our children, our young people may not learn if there's no explanation, no intentionality behind hard work. Because as you kind of said there, it takes hard work to get to where you are. It takes a lot of intentionality. It takes a lot of focus, discipline, all of these core values that, frankly, I don't think are even being taught anywhere except for in some homes. And how do we help people understand that hard work is extremely important to be able to even consider any type of success, right? And so my question directly to you would be, how you as a father separate, or do you separate the thin line between helping our children still be relational, in the aspect of great effort, you did what you could, and still take them for ice cream without having that, but you missed that game saving, whatever. How do you separate that? How do you stay within a healthy structure with that and still teach your children core values and things that are important for them for their development?
That's a great question. I think a couple of things. One, I believe that whether you're a parent or not, right, far more is caught than taught. And so in life, people learn more by watching your examples. If you're a leader in any capacity, the people around you are going to watch you sweat and see you sweat, and they're going to learn more from that than what you say or what comes out of your mouth, right? A slogan on a t-shirt doesn't drive or change behavior. It's the lessons that we learn directly to do.
Yeah.
And so raising kids, it's even more important. And, I believe that I got to be practicing what I preach. That my kids need to see me get up in the morning, read my Bible, do my devotional, exercise, keep myself in shape, eat healthy, the way I treat my wife, the way I treat others, right? All those things, the way that I work are super important. We just moved from the beach where we had a pretty cushy lifestyle, and we just moved to the farm. My kids are making a dramatic transition. And I'm talking about being farm tough all the time. Like, you guys are going to grow up now and you're going to be farm tough. And what that means is, like, you're going to learn to do a project and finish it until it's complete. You're going to learn to do some stuff that you don't want to do, but it's necessary to do to make this work. You're going to learn how to restore something. All those things are really important. So I'm out there doing it with my kids. It's not like I make them do it and I sit back and watch them, right? Or I sit in a lawn chair and watch my kids work. I'm out there working with them and showing them good habits. Sometimes I'm showing them not good habits. Yesterday, I was out cutting down some trees with a pole saw, and the chain kept coming off the saw. And finally, after like the 15th time, I got so frustrated, I kind of slammed the saw on the ground. And my one middle son's watching me do this, and he had seen the saw come off a couple of times. And I looked over and I said, all right, you know it before I'm even going to say it. That was not the right thing to do. We don't throw things just because we get upset. I was clearly frustrated, not the right behavior. You know that, right? And he's like, yeah, Dad, I got it. Right? But like, seeing me show a moment of frustration, showing me be real, but then seeing how I come through that, right? It was a big point of accountability. I'll say the second thing is that you mentioned the NBA, and I love the fact that you brought the NBA up, because the NBA is in a bubble right now, right? They're physically in a bubble. Yeah. And that's the worst thing that we can do for ourselves and for our kids, is to put them in a bubble. We need to allow them to experience failure, to experience adversity, to experience hard work and all those character qualities that we're talking about. Because if we don't, then that's where you get the problem that you described, where our kids get into adulthood and they've never experienced failure. They've never had those opportunities to grow through that. So what happens is, what's happening a lot with the millennial generation is they experience failure in adulthood and they've got no coping mechanism. They don't know how to deal with it appropriately. So it becomes catastrophic in many senses. Their mindset, right? The mental game we're talking about, it goes downhill really quickly. They get depressed, they get anxious, they get in a negative state, and they have a hard time getting out of it, because failure at 8 is way different than failure at 28, right? Oh, yeah. If my kids fail now, those are micro failures. Those are learning moments. We can get through those. Very few of them are catastrophic, right? There's a couple of things around safety we got to worry about, but for the most part, they're small failures. At 28, at 38, man, those failures become much larger. They can be life-threatening. And if we don't know how to deal with those because we haven't experienced it in the past, then that can be a challenge. I would also say the same thing is true for success, because sometimes our kids don't know how to handle success. And then they get into adulthood and they get a little bit of success. And what do? They either, they go bankrupt or go broke because they don't know how to handle money, because they've never had that before. And they get a little taste of it and a little success, and all of a sudden now they have no financial habits to back that up. So there's all sorts of circumstances like that where we as parents can show our kids through our own actions and our demonstrations, success and failure at a young age, how to handle those. So that's what it means to be a good kid that becomes a great adult.
Yeah, that's well said. I think about the prodigal son story in the Bible, where, it obviously shares, Jesus is actually telling the story, and he's saying how the younger son leaves the house and asks for his inheritance. The word prodigal itself means to squander. And so we probably have this mindset where, unless the person leaves the house, it's not considered a prodigal. Well, no, there are a lot of prodigal sons and daughters that are not necessarily leaving the house and asking for what's theirs, but they are squandering what they have because of those things that you just mentioned, which are so important. I mean, these core values. See, I live with core values. My wife always says, that my favorite word is intentionality, which is one of the words that pops out, especially when I'm reading your book and seeing, and you wrote a chapter on things are more caught than taught. I saw that. which is so important to know, because a lot of what we do in our examples every day are more important than anything that we can say with our words, right? And when I think about how many people are out there squandering, if you will, not just financial stuff, but also their gifts, skills,
Yes.
things that God created them to have, to be a blessing to the world, and they just haven't been able to navigate the best way. And a lot of it, us as parents, we have a lot of say in that, because God trusts them with us, I guess, with their lives in our hands, and we are responsible to kind of usher them, trusting God at the same time, but ushering them the right way. And so, and you have 4 children, their ages.
Our oldest is a daughter. She's 12, and the 3 boys are 10, 8, and 6.
Okay, wow. So pretty soon they'll be teenagers almost all at the same time. So I'll be praying for you, Justin. But no, you laying down the foundation of Daddy Saturday, I think is so crucial, because there's a lot of health that is being already established in terms of relational health, and also I'm sure emotional health, because I do temperament therapy. And one of the things that I get asked a lot is, well, how do I deal with this one opposed to this one? And the bottom line is, you have to know their temperament. You have to know how they're wired. God wired us a specific way, and we respond in different ways. And I'm sure that's something that you quickly figured out, not only with the first daughter that you had, but when the sons started coming in, and you're like, okay, that's different, that's different, that's different. How do you become, or how are you the dad that you are to each individual child that God has entrusted in your hands?
It's a phenomenal question, and it's something that I frankly struggle with and work on all the time. And the first key that I found in my own life is that you have to understand who you are and who God made you to be. And you have to be comfortable and secure in your own identity. And I think that's Christ made you to be. You need to be comfortable with the fact that you're made in God's image. And so you need to understand that first about yourself, because if you don't have that, then it's really hard for you to be anything beyond that to your own kids. Because then the next step is helping them understand that same thing, that they were created in God's image, that they were made perfect just like He created them, but that they were given unique gifts and skill sets, and that it's our job as their parent to help foster those gifts. That's what the verse around training your child in the way they should go, so when they're older, they will not depart from it. That's what that's all about, right? Is teaching your kids to uncover what their gift and their calling is, so that they can use that down the road for kingdom work. And I think that there's a couple of pieces there. One is there's lots of different personality profiling. There's different assessments you can take. And I do think many of them are helpful. We've found that for our family, the Enneagram has been a great one. Yep. I've used the DISC profile in the corporate sector, as most of your listeners who are in corporate, Myers-Briggs, right? There's a lot of them that are simple. I like the Enneagram, though, because it points out your spiritual personality as well. Right. I'm a challenger by nature. I am like off the chart challenger. And so for me, I've got 2 boys that are also challengers, my oldest and my youngest. And until I understood who I was and some of my personality traits and my tendencies, then I began to see that in some of my kids. Man, that was a game changer for us, because now I know, I'm like, he's just challenging. And he's challenging not because he's invalidating me or he's being disrespectful. He's challenging because that's his personality and that's his nature. Yep. And he's 6 or he's 10. And so he doesn't know how to appropriately challenge right now. He's just challenging because that's what he's built to do. So it's my job to help him understand that there are plenty of things you need to challenge in life. You need to challenge injustices. You need to challenge things that go against the faith. You need to challenge, things that are wrong, or when wrong is done to other people. Those are things you need to challenge. You need to challenge rules that should be broken. You need to challenge norms that are the way that things have always been done just because of the way things have always been done. Those are all things that are great to challenge, but you should not challenge, whether you have chocolate chips in your pancake or not. Like, there are times where you just need to let it go. And so it's our job as parents to channel that. And for my 2 challengers, I've got a lot of work to do. My other 2 kids are vastly different. My middle child, we call him a special because he is easygoing. He works super hard. but he's the one that he's kind of the quiet one that can get left out or can get passed over, and you won't notice things may be wrong, and they are, and you got to sit down and take him one-on-one and get it out of him. So there's different personalities. He's the one that's also shy and may not want to be in the limelight and may stand back. So for him, it's helping him understand that he needs to be comfortable in those social environments and be comfortable. There's lots of ways you can do that. My daughter, she's got her own personalities, and she's a pre-nager now, so we're dealing with a lot there. The point is, you need to be comfortable with yourself, understand who you are first before you can be that same thing for your kids.
Yeah. And I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, by the way. So I totally get the challenger aspect of it. And for those of you that are listening, I have mentioned the Enneagram in the past episodes. I also do temperament, which is the Arnold profile system, and it actually tells you whether you're melancholy, phlegmatic, and it sounds like your middle one is phlegmatic, a supine, sanguine, or a choleric. Those are the different temperaments that we touch. And we also use a biblically based approach when helping people with their temperaments and understanding it. And then I like to add the Enneagram, which is a personality trait, because it also shows you your core desires, your core fears, and helps to look for patterns, not only for yourself, for those that you love and those that you're in relationship with. It's great for work as well, so that you know yourself in the work environment and your coworkers, your teammates, etc. So that's good stuff, man. And once you know more about yourself, it's easier for you to catch things from others and be more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding. I think that has helped me a lot along the years with just helping be open-minded to helping people meet them exactly where they are, because that's what Jesus does with us, right? He meets us exactly where we are and then helps us along the way so that we can live the life that he's promised us. I love that you said that, because go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you, but one of the things that I found that you just brought up, and it totally sparked my mind, is I've also learned that one of the hardest things about parenting is parenting the you out of your child.
Ooh,
and so
that's good.
Because my 2 kids are challengers, I see the worst part of me in them when I see some of that behavior, and it stomps on my fear button, it stomps on my insecurities, because I now see them behaving in a way that I know I also behave, and that's why it's so important to take care of yourself first and understand where you are and what your insecurities are before you try and go and fix that in your kids.
That is so good. And that's what we call living vicariously, through our children. I know I fell into that challenge with my son. My son is an adult now, he's 23. But when he was, playing basketball, I was trying to be the father that my father was not for me and him. And I would be at not only all his games, but at a lot of his practices. And I'm the one dad telling the coach, hey, what about this play? What about this play? And there were a lot of the teams were gracious with me because I had the affiliation to the NBA. So I guess they figured I am some kind of, interesting person. And they allowed me, which was the biggest mistake, because I just had to let my son be my son. Let him be the young boy, the young man, and the man that he is now, because his temperament and personality is totally different than mine. And so my attitude about, going all in and having this gung-ho attitude about, leaving it all on the field, he has that, but it looks totally different, because like your middle one, he's more relaxed, more laid back. If you were to say, fire, he would be, okay, let me go get my sneakers. He is not the type to jump up and down and get, overly excited. And I had to learn that. Because I learned it about myself, and then I had to be open to learning about him. So very helpful tools for us that are trying to navigate this life, not only with ourselves, but also with other humans that God has allowed to be part of our life. And so you're married. I know your wife ventured off to this business. And so because I know you've shared that this also has tremendously impacted your relationship with your wife. And I know there are many listening out there that are curious, how does this help you when now you kind of have your own thing going on Daddy Saturday, and now your kids are probably favoring you over her because Daddy's cool. We have all this stuff going on Saturdays. How has that impacted you with your wife in a great way and also potentially in a challenging way?
Yeah, so it's been a mix of both, right? And I think that like anything else, marriage is like a scale. It's back and forth, right? And you kind of you have to accommodate those changes as you go forward as a couple. We married for 15 years. My wife's had her store for 13 plus of those years. Wow. So we've been doing this a long time. I was way more involved in her business in the beginning than I am today. And I think, part of that was understanding, how do you be married? How do you be in business together? Right. And those all present different challenges. Yeah. So I'll give a great tip for your listeners that are in business, maybe both entrepreneurs or both working together. And that is, set separate times for date nights and business date nights. And so one of the things we did early on was we set a date for a real date night, which was talking about our family, our marriage, our love for each other, our hopes, our dreams, our goals. Right. And there was no business allowed. Then we'd have a business date night where we would go and talk about business, talk about finances, talk about our marketing plans, talk about ways to help the business grow. And, we would then be able to table those and compartmentalize them, because what we found was that a lot of our conversations became very, very business oriented. And it was like, wait, we're not like just business partners, we're marriage partners, we're life partners. And that's way more important than the business. And so that was one way to help compartmentalize those conversations and make sure that we weren't, bringing business into everything. Yeah. Except for the urgent and the important. I think the second thing that we did was we also started to learn each other's personalities as we got to know each other, and we're very different. And so I'm the jump in the water or the pool before I know there's water in the pool. She's the dip the toe in the water to see what temperature it is. And if it's a slight bit off temperature, she's not getting in. So I helped her to do some things that she maybe wouldn't have done without me, or wouldn't have done near as fast as I encouraged her to do. And she slows me down so I don't kill myself or we don't make bad decisions, because, I'm hair on fire, 100 miles an hour all the time. And so that balance really became where, once we understood that, we recognized that 1 + 1 can equal 3 in our relationship if we're smart enough to do that. And of course, have God on our side and are prayerful about our opportunities together. So that was another key thing. I think on the flip side of that, there were times where with Daddy Saturday, it became a mindset that it was not just about Saturdays. Clearly that's, intentionality, engaging your kids, being present was all the time. And so it helped me to find ways where I could also help my wife engage the kids in her own way, especially with our daughter, that were meaningful. And so she could have her time with the kids, and her time is different than my time, right? I'm the get down on the ground, get dirty, play, wrestle, all those things. That's not her. So we could find ways that she could interact with the kids and have her time, me have my time, and it still work out. Now, there's definitely that case where the kids are like, Dad's the fun one, Mom, you just like kind of hang out and you're not doing all the stuff that Dad's doing. So I had to be very cautious and never demeaning my wife, or never putting her down in front of the kids, and creating ways where we as a family could do some of that stuff together, where she's also included and involved. And then, on the really negative side of that, and I started to get, overwhelmed or overcome with the platform. You put yourself out there like that, you feel like you have to, the weight's on your shoulders. I started to try and take control of it instead of letting God have control of it. And so it began to overrun some of our time. Like, I spent insane time writing the book. I spent insane time launching Dad Boss last year on Father's Day, or this year, on Father's Day. And so there's been times where I've been acutely into this platform, and I maybe have ignored our relationship, or I maybe have not spent the time with my kids that I want to, which is ironic since I have a platform on fatherhood, right? A platform that also supports a strong marriage. And so it's easy to get wrapped up sometimes in what you've got going on when you're not looking at the long game and, where you're really trying to go. And so I've had to have some points of accountability, some resets, some reframes in the way I've been approaching things. And, look, I'm the first to say I'm not perfect. So those have been good points in our marriage where we've been able to come back and say, look, I was wrong. I messed up. Here's where, I fell short. I don't want that to happen again. Here's what we can do to change it and make sure that we move forward.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. That's great. And I'm sure the listeners are taking notes. a lot of relational goals there for sustainability, because I believe, anybody can get married, but staying married is a whole different ballgame. And actually enjoying life with
Yeah.
your life partner is truly another, a ball game, if you will. So as we kind of go towards the closing of our conversation here, Justin, tell us a little bit about any next projects, anything that you're working on. I know you just moved, and so I'm sure you got your hands full with moving. Not one of my favorite things in life, but sometimes, right? That's the game plan. So is there anything that you're working on? Maybe another book, maybe a TV show, I don't know. And also, tell us where we can find the resources. I will definitely have them in the description of this podcast so that all of our listeners and viewers can go and get these resources and also book you. I know you do some speaking. As you mentioned, you did a TEDx presentation. And so share with the viewers and listeners some of the things that you may have in your heart moving forward.
Yeah. So a couple of things, I think one, I found early on that I had a focus. It was a positive intent, but I was trying to help dads be better dads. And what I recognized was that message didn't resound well with most dads, because they either said, well, I am a good dad, I don't need to be a better dad, I don't want to be a better dad, or I don't know how to be a better dad. And so much of my messaging now is moved towards really what they want, which is help kids succeed, which is what all of us want, and successful. And so that's what this platform is really all about now. And so I've looked for ways that I can find to identify more opportunities to connect with those dads that around those types of opportunities. So one of the things that we've got coming up is called the Digital Dad Clinic. And if you look across the world, you get 2.4 billion gamers, billion with a B. And, me as a dad, and I look at a lot of other dads, they don't understand gaming. They look at their kids and they're like, I had a Nintendo or a PlayStation when I was a kid, but I don't understand this new level of gaming, the interactive gaming, the staying up all night gaming. And so they don't connect with their kids around that. And in fact, they see it as a real negative because they have a lack of understanding. So the Digital Dad Clinic will be a way where we can have some top gamers teach 101 level classes for dads so they can understand terminology, some of the functionality. They can go and engage their kids in a conversation or even play the game with them and be able to play it at an elementary level, at least enough their kids want them to play with them. A lot of it's around esports, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And they can connect with not only their kids, but other dads and their kids. And so it's a way to take what's today is a barrier, an obstacle, and create a breakthrough. And we can even use it as a ministry tool, because a lot of the chat functions and the forums that are part of these games today can be used in a positive light for that capacity. So That's one thing we've got coming up. We're excited to launch that here soon. And that'll be another new platform that'll have international reach as well. And then I do have another book in the works. It'll be centered around Dad Boss. It'll be out sometime next year. And then we've got a coaching platform that we're launching as well. That'll be a group coaching and then some one-on-one coaching that'll come from that. So I'll have to get some tips from you, Juan, as the ultimate coach on how to do that. And maybe even bring you in as one of my top 5, one of my additional coaches for the platform. We could certainly use you there. So that's what we've got coming up, some exciting stuff. And then people can find me at daddysaturday.com. That is the hub for all things Daddy Saturday. Dadboss.com is where you can get access to the course. And then you can find me, Justin Batt, at LinkedIn at Justin Batt.
Awesome, Justin. Well, again, we thank you. The world thanks you for sharing your gift with it. Thank you for being a great dad, a great husband, just a great man. The world needs more inspirational examples where we can admit, where we fall short, but also empower and encourage where we can be uplifted and we can experience success. And so thank you for that. Looking forward to maintaining this connection and this friendship and relationship. I think it's all about accountability and just, iron sharpening iron. That's how we get better. And so thank you for being open to having this discussion, helping our listeners and our viewers not only be better dads, but also have insight as to being a better man, a better husband, and also just being a better person in relationship. And so that is our episode today, Mind Yours, where we focus on mental health and peak performance. My guest has been Justin Batt, and you can find them in the description below. We're going to have all of those different websites.
Thank you for
Daddy
tuning
Saturday,
into our
Dad
podcast.
Boss,
For more information,
and feel
visit our
free to reach
website
out to
at
him so that he can be a resource to you
Our
and
host,
those
Juan
that you
Garcia,
lead.
is available
And
for
so until
speaking,
next time,
coaching,
remember,
and
we only have one
one-on-one
mind,
You
so
can email
mind
us
yours.
at info@juangarciaenterprises.com. Until next time, remember, we only have one mind, so mind yours.